And it is a timely episode because we're going to be talking about annual reports. Josh, before we dig in, tell me a little bit about Yearly, about your work. And by the way, that is a super clever name.
Well, thanks for having me. Annual reports sometimes makes even me cringe because it's that project that comes up that you think about for a long time and has a long lead time to write all the content, and nobody really wants to do it. But when you're done, you're so proud you have this great document.
Well, next
Well,
year.
right. Well, with Yearly, we're just trying to help, ease some of that stress and tension with nonprofits and foundations and associations when they have to make annual and impact reports by taking them digital and just making it faster and a little more engaging so that you know that your stakeholders are reading your reports.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's good work. So in my experience, foundations, especially when you're a recipient, you're one of their grantees, they always suggest an annual report, but they seldom require it. I think most grantees feel like, well, if they're suggesting it, I should probably do it. How important is it for an organization to have an annual report?
Well, I think it's a great way to showcase the impact you're making. And everyone likes to talk about, nonprofit storytelling. And what a better way to recap what you're doing, throughout the year in one piece to the people that could really make a difference. I see a lot of organizations go on, Facebook and do a post about this great event that they had. And then you have, the executive director of your organization tweeting about something else. I think it's a nice culmination to show those that are going to give back or maybe partner. And when it comes time to end year giving, which is probably fresh in everyone's mind now in mid-January, it's a nice way to say to those stakeholders that might write a check or even volunteer, which is just as important. Hey, this is how we used your funds, and this is what we plan to do in the upcoming year.
So is it really just a donor communications piece, or is there a fundraising angle? And I ask because I get a ton of annual reports and there's almost always an appeal letter with it. And I'm confused. Like, do you want me to donate? Are you thanking me for donating? Like what's the story? What
I
do you
think I
recommend?
think Yeah, I think it's both, and I think it really just depends on the organization. But being clear with the ask that you're making and that call to action from a and communications perspective is what's important, because you shouldn't be confused. And there's annual reports and there's impact reports, and then you see appeals in other types of reports throughout the year. There's governments that I see create reports that are digital, and they do monthly and then quarterly financial updates, right? And they're public. Or I see recaps of events, or even individual donor reports or impact reports, maybe even brochures on certain programs. Some of them have asks and some don't. So I think it's really about thinking about who your audience is and what you want them to do with that. So if you want them to give, if there's an appeal, I think that's fine. And if it's simply a donor communication, how you measure that return on the time that you spent can be done in a number of ways. You just have to be clear with the question you're asking, and then do a good job judging what that response is.
Sure, sure. So it sounds like we maybe need to do a little bit of customization. I mean, I I think most organizations prepare just one annual report, but
Mm.
should we customize maybe how we package it and how we deliver it based on who we're talking to?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at individual donor reports, you can customize it and target it to one person. You could be targeting to a group of people that gave it a certain level, or you could be targeting it to a group of volunteers that have helped you with an important project. So it's so easy now and so quick to create reports that are digital and duplicate the work that you've done really quickly, and not have to start over in terms of a design and layout perspective, and not even have to reprint everything and make different versions of different types of reports that can be customized. And the customization goes really deep. I mean, it could be, your name on it. If I got a report that said, hey, Josh, here's how we spent your funds. That's great. But you can get, I think, a lot more engagement out of adding pieces like video or social media posts that help tell the story that you're trying to tell, and complement it nicely. So, I always hear about show, don't tell, and
Yeah.
showing off what you did, right? So what a better way to do that than to say a little bit about it, and display that with, that relevant video from YouTube, bring that in, or Vimeo, bring that into your report, or a post about your event, bring that into your report. So it kind of gives it a little, life instead of just words on the page.
I think you just named this episode. I think we'll call it Show Don't Tell. Um,
Well, I think
that's
it was like
great.
my seventh grade English teacher used to say that with every paper that they gave back to us, or thing that we had to do. And I guess it stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think back to, I mean, I'm going to date myself, but I think back to some of the first organizations I worked at, and our annual report was, I mean, a serious topic that we had to discuss and budget for was, how are we going to bind the thing? Are we going to use spiral loops, or is it going to be perfect bound? I mean, today it's kind of a non-factor. I mean, these can be delivered digitally and they can be totally customizable, totally personalized. That's beautiful.
Yeah, and you can do it, I guess, a lot cheaper. I mean, there's, the time that you need to take, and maybe people you need to work with to produce a nice looking report, but you don't have to go and spend that money on the printing and binding. And, I think a lot of nonprofits still do, and that's great, because they have segments of their audience that need to see it that way. Maybe it's donors, maybe it's some board members. But for the most part, I mean, why not save the money and put it towards, programming? I think that's a big trend that I'm seeing.
Absolutely. And printing, printing 100 reports is much different than printing like 5,000. I mean, if you can deliver the majority digitally, it's much better to do it that way. Um, okay, so that's one of the trends you're seeing. Is there any other trends that you're seeing with digital or?
Yeah, a huge trend with digital reports, and again, this is digital annual reports, impact reports, several others, is about tracking metrics. I mean, you talked earlier about, that return that you see from the time that you take and the money you put in for say an annual report. But on the whole, going back even the last couple of years, you're not really sure who's reading it, if it's getting read. And now I think it's really easy to take a look at how much time people are spending on your reports, or where people are reading your reports, and how many unique visitors are viewing that report and combing through it. I think if your report's more engaging, you can track that by the time spent on the report and look at that year over year. So the big trend I'm seeing now is this leap people are taking from having a report that used to be, either printed or a PDF, maybe a flip book, but something that's a little more static like that,
Yeah.
and putting it into a web-based form, something, digital, that has these engaging factors, and being able to go from, well, who read my report and how did that tie into how much we got in donations last year, to I have all this data and all these great metrics now, and that equals X amount of dollars, X amount of volunteers, whatever that concrete set of goals are that you were really planning for. And now you can say, okay, well, this is our new baseline. And then as we go into 2023, coming out of this year, we can, measure against that. That's something that we just didn't have before, and nonprofits are headed towards.
Absolutely. It was kind of like one and done before, but now I'm even thinking, like, as I'm listening to you talk, the retargeting potential. And I know that's a little bit of a taboo topic, but if somebody's interacting with your report, I mean, why not show up for them in social media? Why not show up for them in other digital ways so that your organization is staying top of mind? That's another beautiful benefit of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
So
I'll add to that too, because you're making me think. I mean, if I, had a company where I was selling, I'm looking on my desk here, pens, let's say, and I was selling, boxes of 20 pens, I would want to, target the people that are really interested in buying those pens. And I would do everything I can to track, who's looking at the website, who's engaged with it, and keep going back to those, same people. So I think, I think that mindset of, what else are your donors, or potential partners, potential volunteers, doing with their time and their day? I mean, that's what you're competing with when you're trying to put an annual report in front of them.
Yeah.
They'll be in the middle of your report and they're going to get a text from someone else, and it's going to be from the babysitter, the vet, someone at work, distracting them, taking them on another path, and they'll have to come back to it later. There's a lot of distractions you're competing with. And, just like any other type of marketing or advertising, you're competing for their time. So I think, being concise with what you're putting in a report, making it a little more compelling is key. So like we said, if you can track it, then it's one leg up you'll have on all those other things that you're vying for their time with during the day.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they can take it with them. So even if they can't finish reading it on their computer, maybe they pull it up on their phone. That's another great benefit. Okay, so let's talk goals. And obviously one goal is you need to be digital. But what are some other goals that your annual report should have?
I think that, deciding, what you're looking to get out of it is really important. There's a lot of general annual reports out there, that are conveying information to, your stakeholders, and you're doing a great job of telling your community how your programs are doing and how they're impacting, those that benefit from it. But, deciding ahead of time, what you want out of it is key. You don't want to make the report just for the sake of making the report, just because you did it last year, just because your board is requiring it. Have a concrete goal in mind. So, I've seen reports from, a private school in the Northeast that has a call to action to donate. This appeals at the end of every single section in the table of contents in the digital report. Their goal is to drive revenue from the alumni of that school, and they're thinking about that as they go. If you're looking to get more volunteers out of it, have a plug for volunteers. So having concrete goals is really important.
Absolutely. And I think you sent us some samples of great annual reports. So I will make sure I link those up in the podcast notes. So we've talked about goals, we've talked about the need to be digital. What are some of the misses that you see nonprofits make with their annual reports, other than maybe still going for the perfect bound paper printout?
Too much text is the number one. I mean, there's some reports that, go on and on and on. And while it's important to convey all those details in your mind, it doesn't mean that the person reading it is going to let it soak in the same way. I think there's all types of different learners out there. So having that nice balance and strike between text and photography, videos, and other things that you can embed within your report that are a little more interactive, like social media, is not only a trend, but it's there for a reason. There's a little more engagement that way. And, there's also some best practices in digital around having, too much text on the screen, where it's not necessarily a Kindle product you're delivering or a novel. It needs to have, this component of showing off, how you're impacting. So a little more than text is a good way to go. And that's easier said than done. I mean, you may write something and then try to trim it back, and that could take you days to weeks.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We always coach people, you want to tell stories that are memorable. And if it takes you multiple pages to tell the story, it may be too complex. You may be going into a level of detail that they're not going to be able to easily recall and share it with their friends. Because, I mean, that's another goal. You want people to be so moved that they run and tell their hairdresser, their husband or wife, their children. You want the good news to spread. That is great advice.
And it's an art too, right? I mean, it's not something that, comes natural to everybody, but I think there's more tools out there to help you do that in the digital world. So it's worth giving it a shot.
Absolutely. One thing I love, a common theme I saw in the examples you sent over is it's a good mix of being, um, I don't know if it was a PDF or if it was more like a presentation file, but it was something that you could scroll through, but then there was video incorporated as well. And I love that because I think about my parents who, if you send them a video, they're just going to be bemused. I mean, they're that's not their thing, but they'll flip through something because they prefer to read their content. So having that kind of mix is, I think it's great, especially if you're serving an older generation.
Yeah, I think another mistake that I see is that people think that they don't have the talent or the design background to go and make something web-based that includes that nice mix of video, text, and everything else that we talked about. And I think it's just getting easier and easier out there to do that. I mean, every new platform you try, I think, takes a little bit of trial and error because there's a learning curve, but it's not that steep anymore. And I think the mistake is that you think you have to spend, a lot of resources and funds um, on getting help when, I think, a lot of it can be handled, with the partners that you already have or in house, and that can go a long way.
Absolutely. Canva, people, check it out. And there's
Right.
templates galore. Yeah. And Yearly, which I'll make sure I include a link in the podcast notes. So this has all been good. And I want to end with one more good note. So we do a section in every podcast recording where we ask our guests to share a bit of good news for the nonprofit sector. So what do you have for us?
I think that the good news is that that with digital marketing, and I'm going to go beyond annual reports, impact reports here, I'm seeing a lot more collaboration as another trend, even between industries. It's a lot easier now to get in touch with potential partners and
Mhm.
reach out across different sectors and see how you can collaborate. And I see all types of organizations that are getting help from others, which draws even more attention. So I think the bit of advice there that I would give that's good news is use social media or any other digital means to find other people that like your space that can help lend a voice and tell other people about it. That could be influencers, even at on a small level that are in your community that have a lot of followers on Twitter that can talk about, your humane society or, whatever type of nonprofit work that you do and lend a voice. You just have to find someone that has an interest and they can help.
Absolutely. And for all of our listeners, the sponsor of today's program has actually provided us with a digital marketing guide. It's specifically tailored to advertising and using those social platforms. I'll make sure that's in the podcast notes as well. So download that. It's completely free and it is a great guide. I mean, I've been doing this for a while and I read it and I had a couple aha moments. So check it out. Josh, this has been fun and informative. And again, it's timely. I know a lot of nonprofits are working on their reports right now. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Katie.